They called her Emma Richter, a name the world was never meant to remember. She was born in 1870 in the crumbling town of Grafton, New Hampshire. The kind of place where fog rolls in before the sunrise and never fully lifts, where windows stay shuttered not from cold, but from fear. And in the Richter home, a grey two-story wooden shell that leaned with time, Emma came into the world without sound. No cry, no scream, just silence. That silence never left her. The midwife who delivered her quit her practice that very night, reportedly muttering something about a child's eyes too old for birth. Emma didn't blink for the first 2 weeks of life. Her parents, German immigrants fleeing an unspoken past, never spoke publicly of what they'd left behind, but neighbors say the father once whispered drunkenly at a tavern, "The child followed us across the ocean." By age 4, Emma hadn't spoken a single word, but the family's animals, dogs, goats, even chickens, began to behave strangely, first refusing to eat, then mutilating themselves. The family horse was found drowned in the nearby creek, its eyes torn out as if it had done it to itself. That same night, neighbors saw Emma standing barefoot in the snow, watching the moon, her nightgown soaked in blood, not hers. Her mother tried to bring in a local priest. He lasted exactly 3 minutes in the Richter home. When he emerged, he was weeping. He gave up his faith the next day. What terrified the village most wasn't what Emma did, but what she didn't do. She never aged normally. Her skin remained porcelain pale, her hair never grew past her shoulders, and her eyes, grey with flecks of violet, never looked at people, they looked through them. Doctors came and went. One from Boston took her to the city for study. He returned a week later, hollow and broken, refusing to speak of what he'd seen. He died 2 months later in an asylum, scribbling the word mirror over and over again on the walls. This isn't folklore. There are records, hospital files, priest journals, the Richter family ledger, all buried deep because what Emma was didn't fit into any theology or science, and those who tried to explain her vanished. By 1876, Emma was 6, but something about her presence had already warped the Richter household. Her father stopped working the fields. He sat in the parlor most days, staring at nothing, clutching a Bible he no longer opened. Her mother sang lullabies to dolls with broken faces, as if mourning children she never had, or had lost and couldn't remember. The townspeople, afraid yet too proud to admit it, whispered behind closed doors. Some swore the Richter home groaned at night, not from wind or wood, but from voices beneath the floor. Others claimed their clocks stopped when Emma walked by. Lamps blew out. One neighbor, a stonemason, fell into a trance just watching her through a window. He carved her face into 42 bricks before hanging himself, but nothing disturbed them more than what was found in the attic. It was the carpenter's apprentice who discovered it, a boy named Caleb, barely 15, hired to fix a leaky roof. While lifting planks, he stumbled upon a concealed chamber, no larger than a closet. Inside were mirrors, dozens of them, some cracked, others pristine. All turned inward, facing each other in a perfect circle. At the center was a wooden stool, and on it a single grey hair ribbon tied in a bow. Emma's ribbon. Caleb was never the same. He screamed for hours, then lapsed into silence. He wouldn't speak again. His family said he drew the mirror circle every day on the walls, floors, even on his skin. He eventually bit off his own tongue. The priest, the same man who once fled in tears, was brought back by force. He lasted longer this time, 5 minutes, but when he exited the attic, his left hand was scorched, not burned, scorched, blackened like iron pulled from a fire. He claimed he touched nothing. The Richter parents denied the room existed. When the sheriff came to investigate the following morning, the attic was sealed, the chamber gone, only insulation and splinters remained. But the boy's drawings matched the mirror layout perfectly. He couldn't have imagined it, and others in town began seeing reflections that weren't their own, faces looking back that didn't move with them. Emma, meanwhile, never smiled, never wept, but once a neighbor saw her gaze into a puddle and whisper, "You're not supposed to be here." It was unclear if she meant herself, or the thing behind the glass. In January of 1877, a storm buried the town of Albrecht in 3 feet of snow. Roads vanished, telegraph lines froze, and in that forced silence, something surfaced. A box of unsent letters hidden beneath the floorboards of the Richter home. They were all addressed to the same person, Dr. Horace Emery, a psychiatrist from Boston who had once treated Civil War soldiers afflicted with hysteria of the soul. He was infamous for studying cases the church refused and science abandoned. Each letter was written by Emma's mother. The earliest one, dated August 1874, read like a confession. Emma hums in her sleep, but not lullabies, hymns we've never taught her, Latin verses that bend the air. Last night, I woke to her levitating off the bed, arms crossed over her chest like a corpse laid to rest. When I touched her, I saw another face over hers, flickering like a flame. Later letters grew more desperate. I burned her cradle, doctor, but she made another one with sticks and thread, perfect in size. I watched her place a bird inside and rock it to death. She speaks to the mirror more than us now. She says there are people behind it, but only she can hear them. She asks me if I remember her, says she was my sister once, in another life. I never had a sister. The final letter, never sent, was splattered in what appeared to be blood. It contained a single sentence, "Please bring fire, or salt, or God." Dr. Emery never responded. He never received them. The postmaster admitted years later on his deathbed that he read the first letter and hid the rest. "I felt it was best," he whispered. "There are things a man should never know about a child." When townsfolk learned of the letters, they demanded Emma be taken to an asylum, but the doctor at St. Albans refused her, not out of disbelief, but fear. He had met her once before, he said, in Virginia, in 1851. The problem? Emma hadn't been born yet. In the spring of 1877, after the discovery of the unsent letters, Emma's parents were desperate for outside help. The church was reluctant. The doctor refused. But one voice came forward, a nun from New York who had read about Emma in a whispered column meant never to be printed. She arrived unannounced. Her name was Sister Magdalene, but she never used it. "Names give permission," she said, "and this thing feeds on permission." She wore no cross, carried no Bible, and kept a small pouch of white salt pinned inside her robes. When she entered the Richter home, every candle extinguished on its own. She asked only one question of Emma. "Do you remember where you came from?" Emma didn't answer with words. She drew a perfect spiral on the floorboards with her fingertip. Inside the spiral, she placed 3 items, a tooth, a piece of her hair, and a sliver of bone from a dead bird. Then she whispered, "Not this time, but I remember the fire." That night, Sister Magdalene sealed the room with chalk symbols taken from a book banned in the Vatican. She remained inside for exactly 6 hours. No sound came out. No one went in. At dawn, the door opened and the nun walked out, pale, trembling, with blood running from both ears. She never spoke again. They said she bit off her own tongue. Her final written words, left on the back of a church pamphlet, were, "This is not possession. Possession is loud. This is a guest who never leaves, and it wears her like Sunday clothes." She was taken to an abbey in silence and lived until 1902, staring at mirrors and weeping whenever bells rang. She painted spirals on every wall of her room. The church tried to deny her ever visiting the Richter home, but her travel records proved otherwise. A ticket stub from a coach line, a small journal entry. Going west, the girl without time, her bag, salt pouch intact, was found decades later in the walls of the Richter house. Untouched. By the winter of 1877, after Sister Magdalene's departure, something shifted, not in Emma, but in the house itself. It began subtly. The family cat refused to enter Emma's room. Knives would be found placed in strange patterns on the kitchen table, always before sunrise. The attic, which had been locked for years, started creaking every night, as if someone were pacing barefoot in slow, deliberate circles. Emma no longer needed to speak. She merely looked at a thing, and it obeyed. One evening, her father joked nervously about sending her away again. That night, every clock in the house stopped at 3:11 a.m., and in the morning, his shoes were filled with river mud, despite the nearest river being over 8 miles away. The family began to whisper that the house was listening, not to sound but to intention. If someone dared speak against Emma, something would break. Once her cousin laughed at her drawings. 2 days later, the boy woke screaming, his tongue covered in spiral burns, and he couldn't form words for weeks. Her mother tried to pretend it wasn't real, until the day the mirrors turned black. Every mirror in the house, all at once, darkened like ink had been poured inside the glass. no reflection, just pitch. A travelling priest was summoned again. He brought no relics, no crosses, only a notebook and a small tuning fork. After sitting alone in Emma's room, he left, trembling, whispering only one sentence. This house is no longer a structure. It's a vessel, and it's awake. In the nights that followed, the floorboards pulsed as though breathing, walls warped when Emma was angry, fireplaces lit without wood, and still Emma didn't sleep. She sat in her chair, eyes open, humming a melody that no one could place. It was not German, Latin, or even recognizable as earthly. It was just wrong. Locals began calling it the house with the girl who brought the night. Put inside. Some claimed that if you walked by at the right time, the windows blinked, not flickered, blinked, like eyes. By the end of the year, the Richters had become prisoners in their own home, and the house no longer theirs. It was spring of 1878 when Dr. Alaric Thorne arrived, sent not by any institution, but by rumour. He had read whispers in obscure journals, notes scribbled in the margins of outdated medical books, letters from nuns who spoke of a girl who heard God backwards. He came not to heal, but to witness. Dr. Thorne was no ordinary physician. He'd spent years studying what he called cognitive inversion, the theory that the mind, when twisted by trauma or touched by the divine, begins to interpret reality in reverse. He believed Emma Richter was not sick, but correct, that the rest of humanity was simply blind to a deeper order. He arrived unannounced, wearing a black coat stained with chalk dust and smelling faintly of burnt herbs. He did not ask for permission. He merely entered the house and asked to speak with the girl. Emma was sitting in the hallway, sketching with her fingernail on the wooden floor. Symbols, not random, not childish, mathematical, geometric, ancient. Dr. Thorne said nothing, only knelt beside her, placed a pocket mirror in her lap, and waited. She looked into it, smiled. Then, in a voice they said didn't sound like hers, she whispered, "You've come far for the wrong reason. You came to understand, but you'll leave with something else." That night, the house grew colder than it had in years. The floorboards bled dark sap. The barn caught fire with no flame, only heat. And in the morning, Dr. Thorne's hair had gone entirely white. He did not leave. For the next 2 weeks he remained in Emma's room, speaking with her in strange cadences, scribbling diagrams on the walls in charcoal, chanting Latin phrases no priest had ever heard. When her parents demanded he stop, he calmly said, "She's not a girl anymore, she's a mirror, and the world's reflection in her is not what you want to see." By the 15th night he'd boarded up all the windows in Emma's room. Save one. Through it, he claimed, something would arrive. A listener, he called it, the thing that trained her thoughts. And on the 16th night, Emma spoke a sentence in a dead language no one recognized. The house shook, the last normal hour of the Richter household passed, and what followed could no longer be described in human terms. By the start of the 3rd week, the Richter family no longer recognized their home. The air inside the farmhouse felt denser, as if sound moved slower. Candles flickered in rooms with no draft. And beneath it all, always beneath it all, there was the whisper. It began like a tick in the walls. Emma's mother, Clara, first thought it was mice, but it wasn't skittering. It was rhythmic. It came at 3:03 every morning. 5 soft knocks behind the headboard, a pause, then a series of syllables too smooth to be rodent sounds. Dr. Thorne called it residual language. He said the house had become a recording device, a phonograph for the dead. Every word Emma had uttered in those late-night trances had embedded themselves into the timber. The walls were now speaking back. That week, Clara stopped entering Emma's room. She told the priest from St. Elias Chapel that the floor in front of her daughter's door pulsed, almost like a heartbeat. The priest scoffed, until he stepped onto it himself and fell unconscious. He awoke whispering a phrase no one understood. Later, it would be found written backwards on the bedroom wall, a name not meant for mouths. In the attic, black mold bloomed in the exact shape of a compass rose, with one point always aimed at Emma's room. Windows cracked, mirrors warped. Even the animals on the farm turned strange. Cows mooed without sound, and the dog stopped barking, simply staring at the horizon for hours. Emma, meanwhile, remained calm, not possessed, not wild, just still. Her sketches became more refined. She now drew machines, mechanisms with interlocking gears and symbols, like she was building something from memory, something not of this century. And one night, Dr. Thorne told the family he had received a message, not from Emma, from the thing listening through her. It said, "Do not move her. Do not silence her. She is the bridge." When Clara begged to know what that meant, Thorne replied quietly, "It means if she stops, something worse will speak instead." From that day, no one spoke above a whisper in the house, not even the walls. It was on a Thursday, beneath the weight of thunderclouds, when Emma began humming a tune no one had taught her, a circular melody like a machine turning endlessly. Her fingers tapped out its rhythm on the table as she sketched with an intensity that unnerved even Dr. Thorne. She no longer spoke, at least not in ways anyone understood. Her words came in bursts, muttered in her sleep or inscribed onto paper in symbols unfamiliar to any known language. Dr. Thorne sent copies of these scripts to Harvard, Yale, and even the Smithsonian. One reply came back. "This is not human linguistics. This is pattern logic, mechanical thought." Emma was now drawing what she called the memory machine. She never looked up while working on it. Her hands moved as if recalling something etched into her bones. The machine in her sketches had no obvious function, no crank, no visible power source. Just concentric gears surrounded by sigils that bled ink when copied. Dr. Thorne once tried to trace one of the symbols. His nose began to bleed. The moment he stopped, it stopped. The machine was remembered, not invented. Then came the night it rained blood on the Richter farmhouse, not from the sky but from the ceiling beams. A deep red ooze seeped through the wood directly above Emma's desk, soaking her drawings but not smudging them. Instead, it darkened them, as if completing them. At 2:44 a.m., Emma whispered, "It's almost ready. The bridge needs one more gear." Her eyes never moved. She was speaking to something no one else could see. The family no longer questioned if this was possession. It was worse. Possession implied invasion. This felt like collaboration. In the barn, the cows refused to eat. One dropped dead facing east. The family dog dug a hole under the porch and wouldn't come out. Even the local crows avoided the farmhouse. It had become a warning on the land. Dr. Thorne wrote in his journal that Emma's memory machine wasn't designed to do something. It was designed to open something. And all Emma needed now was someone to power it. The carpenter's name was Levi Kessler, a sober, God-fearing man who had built barns and pews across 3 counties. When the Richters hired him to repair the sagging beams above Emma's room, he arrived without hesitation. But by the time he left, he would vow never to enter another house built before the flood. Levi was up on the ladder when he noticed something odd. Beneath the wood was another layer. Older. Not oak, not pine. Something darker, harder. It rang when he tapped it, metal beneath the beams of a farmhouse built by hand. He pried up a small piece. What lay beneath chilled his bones, a metallic sheet covered in etched spirals, gears that moved without sound, and grooves that pulsed faintly with heat. It was a machine. Inside the roof. Levi recoiled, nearly falling. Then he saw the girl, Emma, standing silently in the doorway. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the opening in the beam. She whispered, "You found its lid." He asked her what it was. She only said, "The top of its head. The rest is sleeping." Levi closed the beam with trembling hands and came down the ladder without saying a word. He told the Richters he was sick, feverish. He left that night and was later found muttering in German in a church pew, carving circles into the wood with his fingernail. Dr. Thorne wrote, Levi saw something older than the house, something built into it, not added, but grown inside it. The machine wasn't Emma's drawing, it was the house itself. The walls began humming, barely audible, like a heart murmuring in sleep. Emma's sketches shifted too, no longer flat designs, but cross-sections, the house as a living entity, beams as ribs, pipes as veins, and at the center, always the same room, Emma's. The blood from the ceiling had vanished, but something worse remained. A resonance. Nails vibrated in the walls, knives left on tables pointed east by Mornies. Yeng, the dog under the porch, wouldn't stop scratching. Emma no longer needed to draw. Now she listened, and the house responded. By autumn, the Richters stopped asking questions. They stopped asking Emma what she saw, what she heard, what she knew, because every time they asked, she answered, and the answers were getting worse. The town's pastor, Reverend Mallory, came to the house on October 9th. He had heard whispers, that the child was speaking in tongues, that she had knowledge of things not meant for her time. He thought perhaps she was possessed, or worse, prophetic. He brought his Bible, oil, and a will hardened by fire and doctrine. He left in silence. He walked out the front door just past midnight, face ashen, lips sealed. He was not seen in public again. That Sunday the church bell rang by itself, though no one pulled the rope. A dog howled, windows cracked. Inside the house, Emma sat in the parlour, murmuring to the walls. Dr. Thorne began noting behavioural drift, not in Emma, but in those around her. Servants began hearing voices. A farmhand hanged himself in the barn with no note, only the word "listen" scratched into the dirt. Mrs. Richter was caught humming lullabies in reverse. It was not possession, it was transference. The house was speaking, and Emma was its tongue. No more sketches. Now she simply spoke. And when she did, things happened. Thunder with no clouds, blood in the well. A child nearby went missing, only to be found sleepwalking through fields miles away, repeating a phrase in Latin no one had taught him. Dr. Thorne asked Emma what she knew of these things. She smiled and said, "I only finished the sentences." Then she went to bed. When he looked at her pillow later, he found underneath it an old parchment, not a drawing, a blueprint, dated 1672. It showed the house, her house, exactly as it stood today. Except the original owner's name wasn't Richter. It was Richter Kenntnis, German for direction of knowing. The house had been planned, not built randomly, but built with purpose. And now its purpose was waking up. Dr. Thorne wrote, "If Emma is the mouth and the house the mind, then the town itself may soon be the body. This is not haunting, this is Genesis." The first time they saw him, it was Emma who pointed. She stood in the hallway, facing the wall beside the staircase, the one covered in ivy-patterned wallpaper since the house was built. With a calm voice, she said, "There's a man behind it." Mr. Richter peeled back the wallpaper that night, expecting mildew or wood rot. What he found was worse. Etched into the plaster, hidden behind layers of paper and paint, was the faint outline of a human figure, arms stretched wide, palms up, eyes drawn wide open in a disturbing, unnatural shape. The figure's eyes were coloured in with crushed lapis pigment. Bright blue, still vivid, still watching. They tried to paint over it, twice. Both times, by morning, the paint had peeled away. Only the blue eyes remained, untouched. Emma stopped speaking after that. For 3 days, she did not say a word, only stared at that wall. On the 4th day, she whispered, "He's the teacher." Dr. Thorne returned, more intrigued than afraid now. He tapped on the wall where the figure lay. It rang hollow, a hidden cavity. They broke through it that night. Behind the wall was a small sealed chamber, no bigger than a coffin. Inside they found bones, long, unnaturally twisted and charred. Clutched in the skeletal hand was a rolled parchment, written in perfect German script. Knowledge must be earned in silence. That which is told decays. That which is learned survives. The chamber smelled of burnt herbs and iron. It hadn't been touched in over 100 years. Emma walked up to the bones and said, "His name was Samuel. He gave too much away." From that day forward, blue eyes began to appear in Emma's drawings, on windows, reflected in mirrors, sometimes even in the eyes of people who looked too long at her. Dr. Thorne's journal recorded a phrase he didn't understand. The eyes of knowing are not blind, they choose where to open. The how. So was no longer just remembering, it was choosing, teaching, testing, and Emma had become its favorite student. The Richter home was not large. It was built in 1834 with only 7 rooms, 4 upstairs, 3 below. Every inch was familiar to the family. Every door had a purpose. Until Emma began drawing new ones. She sketched hallways that curved where no halls existed, rooms with no windows, doors between rooms that had none. Her chalkboard was filled with crude but detailed architectural diagrams of a house within a house. At first, Mr. Richter scolded her, but Emma didn't cry. She just said, "You're walking through one of them now." The very next night, Mrs. Richter opened the linen closet and stepped into darkness. She expected the usual shelves, linen, towels, jars of lavender. Instead, there was a narrow hallway, pitch black, stretching far beyond what the wall should allow. The air inside was cold and metallic. She backed away. The hallway vanished. They began measuring the house. Tape lines, blueprints, chalk marks. Dr. Thorne insisted on precision, but no measurement stayed the same for more than a day. A guest room grew by 3 inches overnight. A cupboard door led to a stairwell they'd never seen. An attic window appeared in the mirror, though there was no attic window on the house. Then late one evening, Emma took Dr. Thorne's hand and whispered, "I want to show you the music room." He followed her down the basement steps, expecting coal and spiders. Instead, he found a candlelit chamber with crimson walls and a single harp made of bone and copper. It played a soft melody, without strings being touched. The air was thick with incense. Symbols burned into the brick. On the wall, in that same precise German handwriting, "Each mind builds its own cathedral. She has found hers." Dr. Thorne stepped back, terrified not of the room, but of what it meant. Emma was building this place with thought alone. The house was responding, expanding, becoming something far older and far more intelligent than brick and wood should allow. Emma smiled and said, "He told me the rooms help me learn. I'm his favorite." Dr. Thorne was staying overnight, documenting Emma's condition in 30-minute intervals. On October the 2nd, shortly past 3 o'clock a.m., he heard what he described as 2 distinct sets of footsteps walking in tandem behind the plaster. He approached Emma's room. She was wide awake, sitting upright. She said nothing, just stared at the candle burning beside her bed. The flame flickered unnaturally, sideways, as if reacting to something unseen entering the room. Emma whispered, "They don't like bright light. That's why they bring their own." Thorne asked who they were. She replied, "The ones who walk without breath. The ones who came when I started drawing the rooms." That same night, Mrs. Richter was startled by a soft tapping at her window. 3 taps, then silence. She lived on the 2nd floor. She rushed to the window. No trees, no ledge. Just blackness and the faint smell of candle wax. When she turned around, she screamed. At the far end of the hallway, 3 figures stood, all dressed in 18th century garb, powdered wigs, pale faces illuminated only by the tiny floating candles they each carried in their left hands. Their eyes were pitch black. They didn't move. They didn't speak. Just watched. The hallway grew cold, the flame in Mrs. Richter's lamp snuffed out by itself. When the family came running, the figures were gone, but the wax drippings remained, 3 perfect circles on the wood floor where no candles had ever been. Emma, the next morning, seemed elated. She told Thorne, "They're architects. They say I'm building faster than they did. They're proud of me." Dr. Thorne asked her to draw them. She did. One wore a plague doctor's mask, another had no face at all, the third was stitched together, as if someone had sewn 2 bodies into one. He noted that Emma used no reference for the clothing, yet it matched perfectly with pre-colonial Bavarian ceremonial attire. How could she know? She simply smiled and said, "They said I wore it once too." By October 5th, Dr. Thorne demanded access to the Richters' locked basement. Emma had mentioned the room beneath the house where the blueprint hums, a phrase Thorne initially dismissed, but after the candlelight visitors, he could no longer ignore her. The Richters were hesitant. "There's nothing but stone and coal dust," Mr. Richter insisted. Still, they gave him the key. The basement door creaked open. Cold air surged upward like a gasp from the earth itself. Thorne descended, lantern in hand. What he found was impossible. The walls, every inch of them, were covered in drawings. Not childish scribbles, but precise architectural renderings. Perfectly scaled floor plans, cross-sections, and mechanical diagrams. Multiple languages appeared: Latin, Hebrew, Sumerian, etched into the stone in charcoal, some carved deep with a knife. At the center of the room was a chalk-drawn circle. Within it, 7 triangles, each containing an eye. Emma had never been permitted in the basement, yet her initials were scrawled in the corner of every design. E.R. Thorne knelt to examine a panel of symbols and felt an immediate ringing in his ears, a vibration behind his teeth. When he touched the wall, his lantern's flame turned blue. That night, Emma told him, "You found the blueprint's lung. Tomorrow, you'll hear it breathe." He asked what that meant. She only smiled and said, "You'll need to dream like they do." The following evening, Dr. Thorne suffered his first seizure. It lasted 19 seconds. He reported that during the episode, he was standing inside a cathedral with no ceiling and no end, built from bone and pages. He could hear whispering in every direction, in a language that made no sense but felt familiar, intimate, like lullabies forgotten from the womb. When he awoke, he found a note scrawled in his own hand. "Do not correct the blueprint. She is the architect." He didn't remember writing it. Emma, watching from her bed, simply said, "You've started seeing the real house. You'll see more if you bleed." October 8th, 1870. Dr. Thorne never made it back to the hospital. That morning, neighbors claimed the Richter household was humming, a low, droning vibration like a war horn buried beneath the earth. Windows trembled, birds avoided the roof. Inside, Emma had not slept. She was drawing furiously, page after page, not with her hands, but by speaking. Her voice low, guttural, calling shapes onto paper. Her mother, trembling, knelt in prayer. Dr. Thorne sat in the corner, clutching his head. He bled from his ears. On the wall behind him were fresh symbols, ones he had no memory of carving. He whispered over and over, "It's not a house. It's a body. It grows. It remembers." Suddenly the house shuddered. Every door slammed. Every candle went out. When the family rushed into Emma's room, she was gone. In her place, a mural, floor to ceiling, an impossible, 3-dimensional rendering of an enormous structure, spirals of corridors, doors with no hinges, rooms filled with glass eyes. Beneath it, a Latin phrase burned into the wood, Domus Architecturae Memoriae. The house is the architect of memory. The town searched for Emma for weeks. No body, no trace, just the humming, and the blueprint reproducing itself in other homes. Patterns appearing in floorboards, in attic beams, in the way windows caught the light, as if the house she drew had become an idea, contagious. Dr. Thorne disappeared 1 week later. His journal was found abandoned in the asylum garden. The last page read, "She is not gone. She's in the foundation now, in the angles. They built around her, and they will build again." In the decades that followed, strange architecture spread. Churches with non-Euclidean angles, schools with rooms that defied measurement. Builders claimed they were following something already drawn. As for the Richters, they sold the house. The next family heard whispers through the vents. Emma Richter became a ghost without a grave, a blueprint without a builder, yet she continues to shape the way we live, think, and dream. Not haunted, haunting. You still think this was just a child? Or do you realize now she was the first to see the real world as it truly is? And she never left. The state moved quickly. After Dr. Thorne's findings leaked to a private board of mental health commissioners, Emma was ordered to be transferred to Wellington Institute for the Disturbed, a high-security asylum built like a fortress. The move was supposed to contain the anomaly, but the blueprint said otherwise. Wellington's walls were 14 feet thick, lined with imported limestone and copper rods, primitive electromagnetic defenses. Every hallway was built in exact symmetrical angles, based on research into mind-stabilizing architecture. It was a building designed not for comfort, but for control. Yet Emma stepped in, smiled once, and whispered, "This place already knew me." Within 72 hours, order began to dissolve. Guards reported hearing voices in languages they didn't understand, words that pulsed in the walls like veins. One janitor swore the basement grew an extra hallway overnight. A nurse was found unconscious next to a cell Emma had never entered, her mouth filled with salt water. Most disturbing, though, was the ink. From the moment Emma arrived, the walls began to sweat ink, black, thick, and reeking of cedar. It would ooze down from ceiling corners, forming diagrams no one remembered drawing. When scrubbed off, they returned within hours, only more detailed. Emma never had pen or paper. She didn't need them. Dr. Thorne sent a letter to the state pleading, "You didn't confine her, you gave her architecture a new host." Soon, staff began falling sick, not physically but mentally. One by one, they reported vivid dreams, a room they had never entered but always recognized, a single wooden chair, an altar, a window without glass that opened into darkness. In each dream, Emma was there, but older, wiser, smiling like a mother who had built the crib herself. And Wellington began changing shape, slowly, subtly. A staircase that once led to the west garden now ended in a locked door with no frame. One patient vanished entirely, his cell replaced with blueprints nailed to the walls like wallpaper. They had thought they were imprisoning a disturbed child. Instead, they had invited in a designer, and she was just getting started. Buried beneath Wellington was a room the staff never entered. It had no key, no hallway access, no written records, just a stone door with no hinges, smooth as marble, cold as ice. Some called it the Black Archive. Others pretended it didn't exist. The truth, it predated the asylum by 30 years, and Emma knew it was there. One night, during a citywide thunderstorm, every door in Wellington blew open at once, except for Emma's. Hers cracked gently, as if unlatched by unseen hands. She walked barefoot through flooded corridors, never slipping, never blinking. When she reached the stone door, she stopped, and it opened for her. Inside were not books, not files, but structures. Tiny architectural models, cathedrals with windows that faced inward, rooms with no exits, altars beneath floorboards, the kind of buildings no sane mind would dream of. Emma walked between them like a curator visiting her past. When lightning flashed through the slit window above, her silhouette cast itself onto the back wall, and the room seemed to sigh. By morning, the staff found her asleep in her room, dry, unharmed, smiling. The next day, the head warden began scratching something into his desk with a bone shard. "She's rebuilding." Then he gouged out his own eyes. News of the event didn't reach newspapers, but it reached men in black coats, surveyors and city architects from Chicago and Boston who came under aliases, not to observe Emma, but to study her drawings. They wanted her mind. They wanted the source. One such man, Algernon Bryce, proposed Emma be placed under government protection. "This is no longer a case of mental illness," he wrote. "This is weaponized perception. Whoever controls her controls the shape of reality." And for once, the state listened. Within weeks, construction crews surrounded Wellington, not to demolish it, but to expand it. Blueprints with no official seal began circulating among city planners, designs eerily similar to the ones Emma had scratched years ago. Entire wings were added, not for patients, but for experiments. Secret rooms with mirrored walls, hallways that bent perception. Emma wasn't a patient anymore. She was the source code. But Emma was never building for them. She was building for something else. And deep below in the forbidden archive, a model changed shape on its own. In the fall of 1874, Emma stopped speaking altogether. Not a word, not a whisper, just that same knowing stare. It wasn't silence born of trauma, it was preparation. She no longer responded to questions. Instead, she traced symbols into her sheets with her fingernail. Symbols no one could translate, not even the linguists brought in from Harvard's Cryptography Society. But someone did understand them. A group of elders, 5 men and 1 woman, arrived at Wellington under forged medical credentials. They claimed to be part of a psychological advisory board from Vienna. In truth, they were the last remnants of an obscure guild once known as the Pale Architects, a group excommunicated by the Catholic Church for designing churches where Mass was forbidden. They had heard of Emma. They believed she was what they called a threshold binder, a being that could tether geometry to memory, structure to spirit. Not a prophet, not a monster, but a key. After spending 1 hour in her presence, the eldest of the group broke down in tears. "She's been here before," he said. "She's building what we buried." That night, every clock in Wellington stopped at 3:17 a.m. Thunder shook the building, not from the sky but from below. Patients began humming in unison, songs no one taught them. Nurses vomited black bile, and the walls bled again, this time not ink but a grey sludge with fragments of bone embedded in it. The pale architects entered the forbidden archive. They never came back out. The next morning, only Emma's drawings remained, but they had changed. They now showed Wellington from above, an impossible angle, as if seen from the clouds. But something else stood beside it, a second structure, circular, buried, breathing. Dr. Thorne, now fully stripped of his medical license, visited Emma one last time. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Emma finally spoke. Her voice was not her own. "They buried a temple beneath a house for the broken. I just remembered where the doors are." Then her eyes rolled back, and her body went limp. Emma Richter, they said, slipped into a coma that day. But what really happened was far worse. She left the building, and the building kept dreaming her. 3 months after Emma's coma, the construction at Wellington took a sinister turn. New blueprints arrived, unsigned, undated, written in ink that shimmered when touched. They bore Emma's sigils, but no one questioned their origin. The builders followed them blindly, like men under spell. They began excavating the land beneath the asylum, carving into ancient rock strata never before documented on geological maps. And there, they found it. A circular chamber, 50 feet wide, etched with language that bled when read aloud. Not stone, not metal. Something older. Something alive. Its walls pulsed softly like the inside of a lung. In the center, a pillar, black, slick, covered in faces, each one frozen in agony, mouths open in a scream no one could hear. The foreman who touched it had a seizure and whispered, "It remembers being worshipped." They sealed the chamber, but it didn't matter. Emma began to rise. At exactly 3:17 a.m., she sat up in bed, her eyes wide, pupils blown black, skin translucent. She didn't speak. She hummed. A note so low it cracked the glass in the hallway. Machines monitoring her brain activity overloaded, flatlining, then spiking. One technician ran from the room, blood pouring from his ears. She was dreaming, but the dream was awake. Overnight, Wellington's architecture shifted. Walls extended by inches. Rooms changed shape. A stairwell that once led to the roof now descended 7 flights deeper. Maps became useless. Nurses got lost between wings they'd worked in for years, and in the silence patients began speaking in unison. The god returns, the house remembers. The city issued an order to shut Wellington down, but when inspectors arrived, the gates were gone. Where iron bars once stood was now flesh-colored stone, warm to the touch, humming softly, as if breathing. Some still claim they saw Emma walking through the halls that night. Not with feet, but floating, inches above the ground, her hair trailing like black ink in water, her mouth moving without sound. The asylum wasn't holding her anymore. She was holding it. And beneath it all, in that buried chamber, the black pillar began to pulse with light. Not electric. Heartbeat. By the spring of 1875, Wellington Asylum had vanished from all official records. No property deeds, no medical charts, no surviving photographs, as if it had never existed. The land where it once stood became known to locals as the Grey Acre, a patch of soil where nothing grew, not even weeds. Birds avoided it, animals grew sick near it, and anyone who dared trespass reported strange dreams, always the same one. A girl in white, standing at the threshold of a breathing door. Behind her, a chorus of whispers, "Come, remember with us." But some documents did survive, hidden in a locked drawer in the personal archives of Father Anselm Weiss, the Vatican's lead exorcist during that decade. His final report was never published, but one passage was later leaked by a groundskeeper who claimed to find the original file beneath the floorboards of a monastery in Palermo. Emma Richter is not a case of possession, nor is she divine. She is memory weaponized, living mnemonic architecture designed to reassemble what we sealed beneath bubble before language betrayed us. Her purpose is not destruction, but reconstruction. She is building the God we tried to forget. And what happened to Emma? Eyewitnesses differ. Some claim she ascended, vanished in a beam of light. Others say she decayed in reverse, aging back into an infant before disappearing in her own blanket. But one man, Dr. Thorne, insisted until his death that Emma never left. Wellington is still there, he said, locked in an institution of his own, but only for those it remembers. In 1921, a psychiatric intern visiting an abandoned hospital in upstate New York uncovered blueprints matching Emma's sketches, nearly identical. The facility had been built over limestone just like Wellington. It too had an underground chamber. The intern went missing a week later. Today, paranormal historians debate if Emma was a gifted child, a psychic anomaly, or something far older, but those who've truly studied her case, who've heard the humming when the air turns still, they know the truth. Emma didn't survive Wellington. She became it. And every building that shares its blueprint, every wing, every hallway, is part of the same system, a network not of pipes but of memories, dreaming, waiting, for the next child who remembers how to unlock the door.